Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today, Masechtas Zevachim Daf Lamed Vav. We're going to begin on the bottom of Lamed Hey Amid Beis by the Mishnah, 3 lines from the bottom. Pardon my cold. Says the Masnisim. Mishnah says as follows: Shachnu al manas lahaniach es damai o imorav lamachar. So this is an interesting point. Over here, the improper machshava at the time of the shechita was not in order to do the zrika at the wrong time, but just lahaniach, just to leave it. Oh, either the blood or the sacrificial parts. Oh, l'hoitzion l'chutz. Or here it changes the language to taking it outside. So on this, Rabbi Yehuda Poisel, the Chachamim Machshir, we see that there is a machlokus. Now, why does he say it's possible? Look at the last line in Rashi. Afal pi she'ein kan lo achila v'lo akdairo, which seems kind of hard to understand. There's no achila because he's laniach, or it's just loitzioi, just to take it out. But it doesn't say that you're going to do anything with it. So it's usually, we thought, the din of pigul is only in a situation where it's something which is linked to an achila, that I'm going to eat beyond the time or beyond the proper place. Or a person would instead have the machshava of having the carbon being makdared at the wrong time or the wrong place. So that's what would make sense. However, here, for some reason, we find Rabbi Yehuda's poisel. So I'll have to understand that. Then the Mishnah says, Al manas litnan al gabi kevesh shelo keneged yisod. V'litines hanisnim l'mala mata v'esinim l'mata l'mala. So your intention was to either put it on the ramp, but not at the proper place. Shelo keneged yisod. Says Rashi, O al hamizbeach shelo keneged yisod. Again, not by the proper place. Or your intention was to put the blood application, which is supposed to go on the top, like a chatas, on the bottom, below the chutta sikra, or the opposite. An oila, which is kind of like counterintuitive, an oil means up, but an oila is the dam is put on the bottom, below the chutta sikra. So if your intention was to putting it in the wrong place, ves anisnim, as we continue, bifnim b'chutz, ves anisnim b'chutz bifnim. So your machshava was to put it in the wrong place, shiachlu tameim, for tamei people to eat it, shiik revuhu tameim, or for someone who is tamei to be makriv, which he's not supposed to do, shiachlu arelim, or someone who's an oral, which doesn't mean they just neglected doing bris milah, but his brothers died machmas milah, but he still can't do the avoda because he's still b'metzias and oral. Vishe krivuhu arelim, or if again either an oral eats, which he's not allowed to, or he does the avoda. L'shevrat samos hapesach lecha minuna, to break the bones on Pesach, to eat the meat na raw, or maybe in between. Erev damai b'dam hapsulim, that I'm intending to mix up the blood with dam hapsulim, which may not be the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, but nonetheless kosher. In all these situations, the carbon is kosher. Why? And here's the key line: Shein machshava paselos al b'chutz l'zman b'chutz l'mkaymai. It has to be one of these three things: either that you had the improper machshava that was going to be done the wrong time or the wrong place. Of course, there's a chiluk of your only chayv kares if it's chutz l'zmanai, but nonetheless you're still chayv. It's still pigul. Va'pesach v'chata shlosh shman. And the third is a carbon pesach, which was brought shlosh shman on erev Pesach, or chatas all the time. So all these other things don't count, even though they're wrong machshavas. But that machshava is not going to passel it. Okay, obviously some of these things will passel But your intent, it wasn't that it actually happened. It's just that you had a machshava b'shas shchita for these things. Okay, so my time to Rabbi Yehuda. Let's go back to what we said at the beginning of the Mishnah. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say that that the carbon is possible with a machshava b'shas shchita, but it was almanas lahaniach l'hoitziyoi? I thought it's only ichila. So Amar Belezer trey kroiksi, but there's actually two psukim. B'naiser kosavecha, b'naiser. Kosavecha, one pasuk says l'sim emenu ad biker. It says you can't leave it over till morning. V'ksivecha amar yaniach emenu ad biker. And then it says you can't leave it over till morning. The question is, what's the reason why we have these two psukim? One in Vikra Chav Beis, and one in Shmos Yud Beis. So im in haniach, obviously it's the same thing. So you don't need these two psukim to tell us the same thing. So it's an im inu inyan. So since we don't need it for leaving it over to inyan machshavas hinuach, even an improper machshava will passel. Rabbi Yehuda high krol hachudas, is that what we learn now? What do we learn out from this pasuk? It comes to tell you the prescribed time of when a carbon toida is supposed to be eaten, day and night. That's what it says. Chalipin, when it comes to chalipin, Rashi says that if you're mafresh toidasai, let's say you already were mafresh, you set aside a carbon for a carbon toida, and then it got lost, and you're mafresh another one instead, and then menimsas rishayna. It turns out you found the first one. So we say that the second one is called chalifi toida. So when it comes to, that's chalipin, and then vladois, temuros, menayin tamnu basar, says Rashi, vlad toida temuros toida. When we're dealing with the offspring of a toida, or the temura, one who does a temura, an exchange, if you will. So what, menayin, how do we know in that situation the din would be taka the same tamnu basar? So the pasuk could have just said without it. So the fact that it has this extra word ubasar is a drasha. So therefore, we see that that's the drasha. That when it comes to these things, also they're eaten day and night. Chatas asham anayin. How do we know when it comes to chayta asham? Talmud learn is zevach. Menay rabbi shalmi nazir v'shalmi pesach. Talmud learn is shlomav. Lachmi toid v'chals or kikin shemanazir anayin. How do these other things like the breads? Talmud learn karbanoi kulin karani mehen loyaniach. All of them we apply the din of loyaniach that it can't be left over. So the kasha is, if that's the case, so then how can you tell me that Rabbi Yehuda learns this to teach us a special din that even a machshava of machshavas hinuach, but we see we need a pasuk for this. So im kein lemer kralo sasiru my lo yaniach imenu inu haniach to inu machshavas hinuach. So basically, it's almost like shema min atarti almost. So atina haniach. So I understand the first part of the Mishnah, which said that your intention was to leave it, okay. But the Mishnah also said a case that your intention was l'haitzi. So my kamemar. But furthermore, time of Rabbi Yehuda svarahu. Actually, the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda is logic. It's not from a reboy in a pasuk, but rather it's just through logic. The sanya. Armle Rabbi Yehuda iatem moedim. Don't you agree? Sheim hanichol lamachar, that would have been left over to the morrow shehu pasol. So we know that would be pasol if you did leave it over. So avchishiv hanichol machar pasol. So it's just a svara. It's not based on a pasuk. It's listen, if noiser is pasol, so therefore if he had a machshava should also pasol. El time Rabbi Yehuda svarahu. Again, the whole reason Rabbi Yehuda is a svara, which is the reason why lahaniach he holds its pasol, would be the same reason svara to say below haitzi. But niflag nam Rabbi Yehuda b'kulu. So why does Rabbi Yehuda disagree with all of our cases in our Mishnah? It seems like he only argues up top, but not that later. So behi niflag, what should he argue with? B'shoiver at samoy sa pesach, when it comes to breaking the bones of a carbon pesach, le'echel memenu nar, to eat it raw, zivcha gufim mi mifsol. Are we actually saying that the carbon is possible? Right? It's not, right? See in Rashi, Im if you would break the bones or you'd eat it when it was raw or whatever, or at this level of na, na is like in between. So the carbon will not be puzzle, so therefore we're not going to say it's puzzle machshava. Okay. So we said on condition that Tommy people eat it, v'shikruvu tameim. When it comes to that, that's zivcha gufa mimifsel. So the carbon itself is not puzzle. The problem is the person that's doing the avoda. Shiachlu arelim shikruvu arelim zivcha gufa mimifsel. Same kasha. So again, those cases, not a kasha. The point is, there's nothing inherently wrong with the carbon. So therefore, he's not going to say it's pigel, as opposed to noiser, which in itself does puzzle carbon. Some learn it with a different lashon. Kol kamine. So he says we won't listen to him. Arv daman bedam hapsuin yehuda tamedi amar ein dam mavatal dam. So the truth is, there is logic to what you said. Says Rashi, mi yishmaloi lakriva b'psul hakohanim tameim lo yishmaloi lechen ralim shekriva lemizmech ba'avera hilkach ein machshavos machshava b'davar hatoli b'cherim. These are all things that are totally by others. However, when it comes to the mixture of the bloods, so there, if you would argue, it would be in this case, because he holds that even though it's a mixture of dam, in dam avatal dam, and therefore, since Eruv l'Apostle, so he says the key with the Eruv l'Apostle, machshavas Eruv namu l'Apostle. So in that case, he would say that it doesn't passel Eruv damo behem habsulim kosher, because it doesn't passel the carbon, because we say ein dam avatal dam. Okay. Let's just slow down for a second. Let's look at question 13. I think I said it right. Let's look at the question may help us out. Rabbi Yehuda poisel b'machshevas nuach min asvara, because the in nichel macher puzzle, if you leave it over nicer it's puzzle. So the machshav also madua might mahai taima will puzzle b'machshavas yakrivu tameim o machashav arav damo b'dam upsuim. So the reason if somebody person is makriv, because the carbon itself is not puzzle, and furthermore, v'oid lavko kimine lakrivu b'psul. So we won't listen to him to be makriv, for a puzzle person to be makriv. So we don't care that he had that machshava. And machashiv arav damo, Rabbi Yehuda says in dam avatal dam, as we saw. Okay. All right. Leitines and asinum lamalo mato lamalo or Yehuda tamedi omer shalobim kaimai. If you put the dam in the wrong place, so it's supposed to be below the chota sikra, and you put it above, namim kaimikrin be, that still constitutes as the right place. V'liflog benisnim b'fnim shenasim b'chutz and nasim b'chutz b'nishas b'fnim. So why don't you disagree where your intention was to bring it in the inside instead it was on the outside? Rabbi Yehuda b'inyan makam she mishulish b'dam mishulish b'dam v'basar v'emurim. So we saw this before, and Rashi points this out again. Machshava litin es hanisim b'chutz b'fnim lo pasla. If you have a machshava of something which is supposed to be on the outside, that's going to be done inside, that will not work, will not passel it, because you need these three things. Dam basar emurim, which is only chutz la'azara. B'shas heter abamos. It has to be that all three things can be done, which means your machshava has to be linked to the mizbech achitzayin, which has these three things. However, if you have the machshava about the inside, that's not a machshava to passel it. When we eat Rabbi Yehuda haysvar ziholei v'hasanya, Rabbi Yehuda omer davar ra ribakan. There was a difficult matter. Says Rashi, lo tizbach l'Hashem Elokecha shor v'seh asher yeh bo mum ribakan azhara shel yishchait hachatas b'darim. So it's on azhara that you can't shech the carbon chatas in the south. That's what we learn out from this pasuk. Ribakan chatas sheshachta b'darim, in the wrong place, v'chatish sheniktas dam lefnim, or you bring the dam inside, which is not where it's supposed to be brought, psula. V'leis Rabbi Yehuda shlishi. Fine. So v'leis Rabbi Yehuda shlishi, is it? Does Rabbi Yehuda hold this din? V'nan oim Rabbi Yehuda hichnis b'shaygei kosher. So we learn over there that if a person b'mezid brings this in, that's what it'll passel. However, if it's brought inside b'shaygei, it's kosher. So we see clearly b'mezid, if it's brought bifnim, it is passel. So v'kaimelon b'shekiper, with regard to the achievement of kapara. Hashda umahasam ayli keeper inilo keeper loy, when it comes to bringing it in. If he achieves kapara, yes. If not, not. Hacha dechashuv chashuvi lo kol shekain. So my answer is trade to know. I believe Rabbi Yehuda. You're right. It seems to disagree with his original statement, but there's just two Tanaim arguing about what Rabbi Yehuda says. Okay, so let's maybe see another question. Let's go a little bit slow. Nothing there yet. Okay, let's keep going. So, is it true that he holds, when it comes to a karm chatas, which is supposed to be shaked in the north, if you shaked in the south, they're going to be chayiv malchus? You would think that you'd be chayiv malchus. Talmud Loimer, the pasuk says in its entirety, in Devarim Yud Zayin, lo tizmach l'Hashem elkecha shor v'seh, you can't shecht these animals, as sheyeh mum, if it has a blemish on it, kol davar ra, anything which is a davar ra, ki suavas Hashem elkechahu, because it's an abomination. So what do we see from here? Kol davar ra, anything which is bad, which is, again, we're talking about a mum over here, but it's more than just that. Al davar ra tamachayvo v'yatamachayvo al chatish sheshachta b'darim. So we see again, clearly Rabbi Yehuda holds that when a person who shechs a chatas b'darim, you don't get malchus. How can you say he does? So trade to know Rabbi Yehuda. So it's a machlokas what Rabbi Yehuda holds, whether or not a person who would shech the chatas b'darim, whether he's chayim. Rabbi Abba Moed Rabbi Yehuda shechayiz v'kayvel apigol. Rabbi Yehuda will agree that this can go back and become pigel. So what does that mean? It says Rashi, B'chishev al manas l'haniach. You have the intention that you're going to just leave it there. Shechayiz v'kavel apigol, that it can still become pigel. V'im chazer v'chishev ba'avoda shniya. For example, in the second avoda, let's say during the Kabbalah, you have a machshava al manas l'echel chutz l'zmanai, v'loy omer kvar nifsel m'machshavas hinuach. We don't care that you already had this machshava before. The reality is, it could still become pigel in the second avoda. Rava teda the pigel if nezrika lo klumhu. We know that when it comes to before zrika, it's nothing. The yas is zrika, but once zrika comes, the kavlu the pigel, then it becomes pigel. So this is a proof that the fact that Rabbi Yehuda says machshavas hinuach, the person has this machshava of just I'm going to leave it later on. The reality is that you could still have another that will not passel it from being able to be pigel when it comes to the second one. Lohi hasim hu chad machshavahi. It's like one thought. It says Rashi, "Lo shina machashavta harishayna v'hi ha'isel l'shem pigel." So it's the same machshava to make it pigel. Hacha trei machshavos. It's two different thoughts. Echad is shem sul and not a shem pigel. Okay, because one had to do with the location, and the other one had to do with the machshava. So one that doesn't necessarily prove that when it comes to machshava is the same as machshava to a ma'isa. We alter kosher. We say it's kosher. Let's say you have later on, let's say by the next avoda, you think of a pigel thought. So puzzle. The ain bo kares, but there's not going to be kares, because it was maklim. Chutzlazmanu pigel v'chayav of kares. Well, machar, let's say he places the blood in the marrow, puzzle. Chaz v'chishi ben chutzlazmanu ben chutzlam kaimo puzzle. The ain bo kares. There still will not be a din kares. Tiyufta de Rav Abba tiyufta. So what happened over here? Let's look in Rashi. L'machar pasul chishiv litin l'machar es and esunum l'mata l'mal. You're going to have this machshava about putting in the wrong place, and we said that's like Rabbi Yehuda, but the machshava is hinuach. That just like nicer is a problem, so too machshava. V'lo mishu machshavas nesinas machar dim kain pigul meboy le alma lo havi pigul dezrika deloy kosher be'achil lo asli pigul. Okay. Alma lo mikvasu pigul. So we see it's not true, basically. So Rav Abba said that even if there's a issue in the first time, the second avoda, if you have a pigul machshava, then it can become pigul. But we see over here that that's not the case, right? Fine. Amar Avchista, Amar Ravina, Bar Sila, Chishev, Sheachluhu, Tameyim, Umachar. Your machshava is that a tummy person will eat tomorrow. Chayiv. So Amar Rav Teda, the basel of Nezriko, Chazi, it's not fit. The Chimachashiv, Le Mifsal. And then when you have a improper machshava, it becomes pigul, V'lohi. Hasam, Zarik, Michzi, Hacha, Loi Michzi, Klal. Says Rashi, Basel if Nezrika lo chazi lachila. Right now, it's before the zrika, it's not fit to eat. The chimachashli b'shchita al manas lo ochla lo machar maflig. The hash dechil psulhi blushum pigul. Hasam, says the Rashi, zarek umichsi v'shtakach lo machar ila mishum pigul havi chazi lachila. Okay. Weiter. Rav Chisda. Margla b'pumid Rav Dimi bar Chinna. Basar Pesach shelo hutzla. Let's say you have the carbon Pesach, which is not roasted, or for that matter, lachmi taidish shelo hormo. They didn't separate. Chayevon mishum tuma. There's still a din tuma, says Rashi. Im achal b'tumas aguf. If while you're eating them as tamei, it's still problematic. Says Rashi. Hi kivan di izrak dam. Nittel taharim karenim be v'afagav the ein pesach nechel el tzoli. Okay, so Omarava Teda the Sanya Asher Hashem was a rabbi semori kodshim kalim with elatoma alma afagav the loy b'nei achilin hu chayim le mishum toma. So achinam yafagav the loy b'nei achilin hu chayim le mishum toma. V'lohi hasam emori kodshim kalim chasal gavoya. They're fit for the all high lafuki basar pesach. Shul hutzlu, as opposed to a carbon pesach which was roasted, or the lachmitana shul hormu that weren't properly done, they're not fit at all. Lishnachrina ha'emurim lochazu v'loihi hanach chazu musayu v'hani loichazu klal hanu lakosh hapsulim hanu kol hapsulim hanu kol hapsulim. We'll continue with Beis Shammai next daf. We're going to stop there. Let's possibly see another question. Question TA16. Mehechin hevi Rabba Raya. The Eichel b'tumas basar Pesach shelo hutzla. It wasn't roasted. That you're going to be chayiv. And what was the dechiyah? So he said, because he learned out from the Imorim Kodshi Kalim. The little chazal achigla. When it comes to the sacrificial parts of Kodshim Kal, which are not fit for achila, no shechayiv. But dachi the hasam chazal musayu lachilas mizbeach. It is fit for the mizbeach, but this is not fit, not legvoya and not lehedjit. Possibly the same question as TB16. Let's see. Mehechin evi Rabbi Raya oichel b'tomas basa zeva shlo hutzlu so dechia shezeh yochel laso sli v'zeh yeshel laso shum shinoi gam achilu ma'akev. Okay, the achilu ma'akev is way off, but the point is that this is the same thing as question TA 16, which again is that since we learned out from the Imori Kadashim Kalim, right? We learned out from the Imorim Kachim Kalim, which are Eino Achila, but you're still Chayiv. So too, maybe the same thing by this. It wasn't Rosa, it's not Chayiv. But the answer is that at least when it comes to, so we say no, the Pesach is loy legvaya, v'lo lehedjit. So it's therefore you can't compare it to the case of Imori Kadashim Kalim Adkan.